were made in it, and they kind of correlate and go along with some of the things that in my personal life I've ranted to the people that I know best. I ranted to them about these points about how everything's become dystopian and sterile. There's no character to anything anymore. Everything is just being turned into these large blockchains, and it kind of like sucks the soul out of our nation, and it's depressing. It's depressing, and I think it's almost engineered to be that way. I don't know if the conscious effort behind everything becoming this way is I don't know if there is a conscious element to it necessarily, but I think that it's more of everything has to just be refined down to its ability to serve the most basic purpose. So, you know, the user experience is no longer important because people are seen more as economic units and less of individual personalities, and with characters that need that with characters and traits that need to be uplifted. Instead, they're just seen as or we are seen as, or just economic bots, drones, whatever, meant to consume, and the aesthetics of our surroundings aren't important. They're just not important in this new dystopian reality. So I found this video. It's by Sargon of Akkad. He's actually one of the contributors on a YouTube channel called The Lotus Eaters, which I watch from time to time. They're based out of England, and sometimes deal with subjects dealing with the United States, and those are more the videos that I watch because that's my current scenario. But I also watch some of their stuff about England and Europe, just because, you know, we're kind of all in the same boat right now, where our borders have been blown wide open, and there's an active assault on our cultures. So we'll just jump right into the video.
The term utopia entered the modern English lexicon from the abbreviated title of Sir Thomas More's 16th century work, a truly golden little book, not less beneficial than enjoyable, about how things should be in a state and about the new island Utopia. Utopia is a Greek word meaning no place, which More chose over the Latin nusquama, which in my opinion was the right choice as it's far more catchy. More served as Henry VIII's Lord High Chancellor of England from 1529 to 1532 and was a distinguished judge, theologian, philosopher, statesman and noted Renaissance man in the literal sense of the word. Utopia, as envisaged by More, was described as a communistic island nation in the New World, in which the population was instructed as to how and where they would live, with houses rotated between them every decade and no property ownership.
Now, does that sound like utopia to you? To me, it sounds like what's being ushered in. No property ownership, nobody really owns anything, you're rootless, you know, like, as in you have no roots in the soil, nothing. Like, even the structure you live in isn't owned by you, so there's no like pride of ownership or personal investment in the local community outside of the taxes that are forcefully extracted from you.
Each person must take up a necessary trade to ensure that they can live what would be essentially a Spartan life of work to provide for the whole. Utopia would contain a slave class.
So that is utopia. Each person takes up a trade so that they can contribute to this hive-like structure while you live a Spartan-type lifestyle. So where is all the benefits of that labor going to? Well, it's going to the top, just like it always does in socialism and communism. It goes to just a handful of oligarchs, rulers, and then the rest of us are left with nothing or the very bare bones essentials. Um, any critics of capitalism would argue that it's the same thing, but it's not. Yes, wealth flows upwards, as it always does. The difference in a capitalist system is that more of it's left down here, amongst just us working plebes, us blue collars. Um, and there is an actual opportunity for us to gain it ourselves and hold property.
Of foreign captives or criminals, weighed down by golden chains until they are eventually
I might have to pause this randomly because I'm waiting at a dock and she just came out. I think she's coming over to check my temperature.
symbolically freed, as displays of wealth were something from which people were to be liberated. Travel across the island required a papers please system of internal checkpoints and passports.
Now, does that sound familiar? The papers please system? It does to me.
Other innovations would include a welfare state, euthanasia, and communal dining halls in which everyone ate the same food. Pubs and
Everybody but the people who are at the very top, obviously.
taverns were not permitted, and personal relationships were policed by the state, rendering premarital sex and infidelity criminal acts, while divorce is easy to obtain. There was to be no such thing as privacy in Utopia. Each person's behavior was expected to be on full display, so
That's our phones. That's all these free Google accounts and Facebook and everything else tracking us. So you have no right to privacy.
that the whole might serve as a check upon the individual to maintain a strict regime of public virtue. From this, the term utopia entered into modern discourse as a description of a fantastical perfect country, well governed and populated by good and virtuous people. This puts into context what a dystopia, Greek for bad place, actually is and how it's brought about. A utopia is created when
Only somebody with a childlike brain could ever truly believe that humanity can reach a state of utopia. We've already reached the state that he just spoke about, but utopia, as is the definition here, an imagined place or state of things in which everything is perfect. Nothing could ever be perfect. Humans aren't perfect. We can't create perfect.
the state and its class of philosopher kings are given unlimited license to rationally recreate society to produce outcomes which are outside of the normal consequences of free human action by introducing artificial barriers to behaviour that serve to support the system itself rather than the good of the people it rules over. A dystopia is when this system produces undesirable results. Now, it might not surprise you to learn that this is not my ideal vision of the future. In fact, to me it seems that the term utopia and dystopia would simply be synonyms given this level of top-down social organisation.
Absolutely. Anytime you try to top-down rule a population of people with one set of ideals that it's supposed to be like a universal, everybody fits under that, that never works.
However, this is the paradigm of the 20th century, and I think the proliferation of dystopian literature during this time reflects the subconscious.
This part is interesting. He talks about how there was a proliferation of dystopian literature like 1984 and like Fahrenheit 451, these dystopian futures that were rendered into sci-fi or fantasy novels, and there was a real appetite for this in the previous century, where now apparently sales of these books, or the creation of these books, they don't take off like they were before. And it's because, before people weren't living in a dystopian reality, where now we live in a dystopian reality. And so the appetite for indulging in fictional writings about dystopian futures just isn't there.
Fear of what has been set in motion. I've noticed that dystopian fiction doesn't seem to be nearly as popular as it once was. Wikipedia has a convenient list of notable dystopian fictions, and if this list is accurate, then it seems that the genre properly began in the 19th century and fully matured in the 20th, which produced hundreds of notable works. This cultural production of the deepest fears of the modern mind carried on at pace into the 2000s, apparently expanding in parallel into the young adult genre, right through to the end of the 2010s. But in the 2020s, it all but stops. It seems that the cultural...
Look at that. You've seen that long list of dystopian books, and now look, you have Ready Player 2, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and Prophet Song in the 2020s. Is that seriously it? Is that... I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is Wikipedia. Like, I'm assuming that this book list is correct.
Appetite for dystopia has dried up somewhat, I suppose. Perhaps Wikipedia's list isn't accurate or exhaustive. I'm not personally a tremendous reader of dystopian fiction, and I don't follow the genre, but one can't help but notice that the collective psyche of our civilization no longer needs to fantasize about what things are like when they start getting bad. Everyone seems to expect that a dystopia would somehow be announced, or that the people living within one were conscious about the fact that their world was oppressive, anti-human. But it's evident that dystopias begin in optimism and end in unfathomable sorrow, and I think we're arriving at that place now. There are so many things that were taken for granted that are just missing from our lives at this point, and we didn't even notice them disappear. It's just that one day you realize that things have changed and
They have slow cooked us. That's the whole reference to literally these things. It's just a progression. It's a slow march, and this slow march winds up with us in our current state.
not for the better, and it isn't readily apparent.
It's because all the momentum is in one direction, and it's towards, heavier authoritarian states, more bureaucracy, the safety tyranny that we live in, where, everything has to be bubble wrapped and all the sharp edges have to be taken off. They never are, but those are the promises that are fed to the weak and compliant of our population to bring tyranny in on the rest of us. So they promise these people security, safety, in exchange for freedom. And that's how we get to where we are now.
Apparent how they might be fixed.
And just real quick, unfortunately, there's a large enough portion of our population that's willing to make that trade and make the trade on all of our behalf.
Without substantive systemic change. And the system's control is so solidified by this point that it would require something truly radical to bring about a different state of affairs. Because these were often intangible things that have simply been taken away from young people today. We didn't imagine that the utopian liberal experiment of the latter half of the 20th.
You know what? It's one of those things that pauses me every time I'm on Facebook, you're on the reels and you're looking through, and there's these 90s nostalgia reels that are put on with, it's always like the same kind of alternative punk track that goes with them. And then it's just pictures of like the idealized like 90s grunge scene, 90s gamer scene. And because I am a product of the 90s, it's literally like it pierces straight into my brain and I cannot scroll away. And I look at these reels and I know that what I'm doing is I'm looking back on my past in an unrealistic idealized light, but the emotion that it captures, this small short little period, this little age, in the 90s for me, where before we entered in the early 2000s, before we entered this just soul-sucking madness of the modern age and what's come to be, there was such innocence. And like, you find yourself like longing for those times. You could never have them again, but when you see these reels, and you see these old videos, like I was watching a video on YouTube about like the release of the PlayStation 2, and everybody was in the mall, and it's, everything's closed down, it's dark, and they're all just they're standing there, and they're and waiting because the release is at midnight, and it's GameStop, and they're all in there, and they're looking at the games once the store opens at midnight. And whoever like filmed this, I don't know if it was a news agency or just somebody with like a camcorder, and it just captured the moment so well. And I look back and I see that, and I'm just like, these people, they're in their moment in their life, and they have no idea that there are forces out there outside of their control that are, even in that moment, moving to take it all away. And I've watched that YouTube video half a dozen times, and I don't know what it is that makes me go back to it and watch it, or when it does, for whatever reason, come up and I get to see it again, I watch it again in its full length and entirety. And I think it is just nostalgia for what was.
The century could go so very wrong. For example, safety on the streets was just a given. Of course, our towns and cities are safe. Nobody really questioned why they were, and assumed that it would always be this way, because as far as anyone...
That's another one. When I was growing up, running around the town that I was in, I didn't have to worry about anything. It was never a thought in my head, or I'm sure even my parents had, that something bad would happen to me or my friends as we rode our little huffy bikes around town. Now, I live in a little city. I live in a little city, and there is no way, if I had a child, that I would just allow them out to ride their bike. Maybe there are still places like that I would, but they're fleeting. They're actually, they're being actively erased, as our government is dumping millions of people who are unvetted and who we never asked to be here. They're dumping them directly into our safe little quaint communities and just ruining the last little bastions of this kind of lifestyle, the high trust lifestyle.
Could remember it had always been this way. However, now people do not feel as if the streets are safe, and this feeling appears to be validated when you consider the composition of the people on our streets and of our government's willingness to treat criminals as if they were the best of us. It's hard to believe
that part's mind-blowing, because they do.
That an actual army of murderers...
Look at these stats. So this is what we know of. These were the actual documented ones, the ones that were caught at the border. We know that there are over 13,000 people in this country from other nations convicted of homicide that have all come in the last couple of years. Almost 16,000 people convicted of SA have been allowed into this nation and allowed to roam free in our communities. And then, over 60,000 for assault, convicted of assault. The nations of South America and other places in the world, when it was like ringing a dinner bell, when our administration basically blew open the border, funded the NGOs that were over there to help get these people here, other nations saw that as an opportunity to empty out their prisons and send them to us. And so that's what we got. We got the dregs of their society. And it wasn't only the dregs of the society we got. We got their low achievers, the people that couldn't make it where they were, and then maybe we did get some legitimate refugees. But if my money was to be placed on something, it would be that they were in the minority. All right, so hold on. I've got to pause. I have to back into a dock, so let me pause this.
Has been allowed to illegally enter.
All right, well, never mind. She wasn't coming to my truck. So I have been here for almost 2 hours now.
To the United States and has been given leave to remain at large indefinitely, or that the British government.
Oh, one of the other points I wanted to make before I got sidetracked here was, so these are the people that we know of. These are the numbers of these kind of convictions that we know of. But I would think that most of the people who came with this kind of record wanted to go under the radar, so did not enter ports of entry, and when they seen border patrol, they fled. They didn't surrender to the border patrol. So these are just the ones that were either not smart enough to get away from apprehension, or possibly came in through a port of entry. How many of these people didn't want to be found and came across undetected? I would probably say that you could 10x these numbers. To be honest with you, 10x them.
Decided one day to simply let out criminals early because they had become an inconvenience to keep. But here we are. Did we really expect, at the end of the 19th century, with the advent of the socialistic mindset of command and control over society, that it would create a depressing, unaesthetic, grey plastic world of petty bureaucracy and an entire culture of zombie workers who aren't even sure why they exist? Our cities are more like ant colonies. They are for work, and people live there like drones until they can't take it anymore and have extracted enough sap from the system to be able to escape to the countryside. Why are we trapped in?
That's another one. Our cities in the West used to be beautiful monuments to our achievement, and now what are they? They are ugly, ugly things. They're crime-ridden, they're dirty, they're crumbling, and aesthetically they're just simply not pleasing at all.
Inside of a system, everyone is attempting to flee. Can we not put a pause on the degradation of our own towns and cities and have a conversation about whether we are heading in the right direction or not? This is clearly not a wholesome state of affairs. Why is it that nearly a quarter of America...
Here's the percentage of people in therapy. And my view of therapy is, if it worked, then wouldn't the percentage of people entering therapy or in therapy be steadily going down instead of going up? It's because it doesn't work. It's not a cure. You're basically paying somebody who has no emotional or mental investment. You're paying them to care, and they only going to care for the hour that you're paying them for, and they're not really going to care. They could give you some advice, I guess, but for the most part, they're just going to sit there and they're going to listen, and you are going to take whatever problems or issues that you have or feel that you have, and you're just going to hyper focus on them and whine about them. And these people are going to sit there and maybe take a note or two, not truly care or be invested in you figuring out how to get out of the situation you're in, because for you to get out of the situation you're in, you wouldn't need them anymore. And if you don't need them anymore, they can't pay their bills. So they're actually, I would My opinion is they're invested in making sure that your problems are never solved.
Americans are on therapy, and God knows how many others are on antidepressant drugs. This trend is only likely to grow as the total society continues to expand its reach over increasingly minute aspects of daily life. But we never question the nature of therapy itself, which is to train people who know they are living an unnatural and unhealthy lifestyle to accept this fate and not fight against it. The very
That is such a good point. Therapy is a training session for you to accept your fate. It literally was going to, that's what it's meant to do. You are unfulfilled in your life. You feel unhappy. You instinctively know that what the modern world has to offer you isn't what you've been put here for. This isn't your purpose. To go work 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day manufacturing disposable goods in a hot, sterile warehouse isn't what God put you here for. You may have to do those things to, provide a living that affords you and your family some comfort, but that's not really what you were put here for. You were put here for greater things than that. I don't care who you are. I don't care how limited your potential is. I don't care about, none of that matters. In no scenario did God create you to work, 50 years of your life in a factory, all just to scrape by. Like, that's not what you were put here for. And you know that. Like, we all know that. Like, I sit here, I work 60 hours a week in a truck. I instinctively know this is not my purpose on this planet. This is what I have to do to survive and put food in my mouth and provide, a comfortable lifestyle for the people I care about. But this isn't what I'm here for. And this isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that therapy is a coping mechanism for you to tolerate and accept things that your soul is telling you, this isn't what you're here for. This isn't what you're meant for. And so, yeah, therapy is like these medicines that they pump out that don't cure the issue. They just mask the symptoms. So you're never fixed. You're never healed. It just numbs you to where it's bearable. So therapy numbs you to where being on this industrial treadmill is bearable.
Nature and purpose of therapy is to make sure they continue to do it anyway, but to what end? This clearly doesn't serve the person who needs the therapy, it serves something else external to them. What the hell are we doing? The purpose of our civilization is revealed in the way it is designed to relate to us. Let's take McDonald's as a paradigmatic example.
This McDonald's example is it hits for me because I'm old enough to remember the McDonald's that he speaks about compared to the McDonald's we have now.
Of how things have changed. When I was young, in the 80s and 90s, McDonald's buildings were inviting and revolved around families. They were bright, cartoony, and often had a play park that the kids could go and enjoy. They had character, and the purpose of them was for something a family could do.
I literally remember these little style tables that they would have with the bolted stools. And one of the fond memories I have is having a birthday that was in a McDonald's. This is when we lived in Arkansas with my friends and everything there, and we had the play center. And it's a good memory. I remember these play centers where like you just meet random other kids and become like friends instantly and just run around the place and have a great time for as long as your parents or grandparents um, were willing to sit there, which was never enough time because you just wanted to keep playing. But for however long they were willing to sit there and tolerate, you running around like an idiot with these complete stranger kids, you were good to go. It was a blast.
On a Saturday afternoon, go and enjoy some junk food and get out of the house together for a few hours.
I literally remember that Hamburglar playground set.
Fast food restaurants were like this. Indeed, most public spaces either revolved around the needs of children or made some accommodation for them. To be an adult is to realize that life really...
And so he just made a comment about how these restaurants and food places would accommodate to children or have a place in or something for kids. And I don't have any kids, but I mean, I want kids, but any society that has decentralized the children of the culture that is a society, to me, that's falling. Like, the kids are the future. And so, like, when I go out, although I don't have children, when there's a kid crying or they're laughing and they're having a good time and being ruckusy, it doesn't bother me a bit. I love to see it. They're kids. They're out having fun. It's the next generation. It's laughter and happiness. And what kind of curmudgeon asshole would I be if that annoyed me? If I was annoyed by children being children. So even when I go to, the hellhole known as Wally World, Walmart, and, there's a kid, he wants his toy, and, he might be behaving badly, which is a whole different, scenario. It still doesn't really bother me because, like, why would I be mad at this child for doing something that I and you and everybody else has literally been guilty of, which is being an asshole as a kid trying to get your way. Now, his parents should obviously reprimand him and bring him into line and teach him good lessons out of this. But any society like ours that has decentralized the children out of public life, so like you go to a restaurant and there's nothing really for kids, like you go and you don't see like the little play mats anymore. It's not that they don't exist. It's just not like it used to be. Like every restaurant would have the little play mats with the color stuff, or if you're at a fast food place, there's the playgrounds with the, very kid-centric stuff. And it's a society that loved its next or upcoming generations, where today we seem to be a very self-centered society that's turned its back on children, and it's honestly kind of depressing.
It really isn't about you, it's about others, and that's what gives you purpose and meaning. It's what prevents you from needing therapy. That all seems natural and right, doesn't it? A civilization that is built around children is a civilization that believes it has a future. It is a civilization that is working for itself and not something else. However, civilization built around adults, trapped in an extended state of adolescence, who expect to enjoy their adult activities without consideration for the sensitivities of children, is a civilization which is basically given up.
This perpetual adult adolescence thing that he's speaking about is a real thing. Like this, you go out and you have adults in their late 20s, their 30s, their 40s, and they're buying, Funko Pops for themselves. And it's not that you can't have hobbies and interests and collect things that you like, but if you're doing that, all while saying, like, you can't afford children, like, is it really that you can't afford children, or you're just kind of like a giant manlet baby that doesn't want to, even for a moment, give up something in order to have those children? You might not be able to have all the fun hobby stuff that you currently are enjoying or or want to enjoy if you have 2 or 3 children. But what's more important, your Funko Pops or, you know, creating life?
Compare the old McDonald's to the modern McDonald's that you will see in every town and city. Why does it have to look like this? Who are their prospective customers? It is certainly not inviting, and evidently represents a spirit of efficiency, which wants to get you out of the door as quickly as possible, preferably serving people who don't want to stay in there in the first place. People who have no responsibilities beyond sitting in their cubicle and doing their unimportant email jobs.
Look at that. I mean, this kind of childless person is obviously the extreme example, but it's just, look at that. It's a complete life of consumerism. These people don't know how to say no to anything that would bring them instant gratification. And obviously they're not the best decision makers. I think there's something about, and this is coming from a man with no children, wants children, doesn't have children. And for the longest I didn't want children because I think I'd fallen into this this perpetual adolescence. And now that I've kind of escaped the trap of it, I could see it very clearly in other people because I traveled that path myself. But like, there's something about when you are around people that have children, even very young parents, there's something different about them. Like, it forces you to grow up and mature and actually display wisdom and learn from your failures, where people like, once again, myself, have had a lot of leeway on just not doing the right things all the time, and not taking life's lessons seriously, because ultimately it was just me that I was failing. I wasn't failing another human being. I mean, you kind of fail your family even if you don't have kids, but not to the extent that you might fail your parents, you might fail a girlfriend, you might fail whatever, but they're not completely dependent on you or reliant on you like a child is, which I think ultimately forces you to grow up quickly.
In order to afford junk food and Funko Pops until they go home to their tiny bedsit and sit alone until the next day. What is the plan here? Just exist
and ultimately, when you meet not the young people that aren't parents, or even the people in their 30s who aren't parents. Women start souring in their 30s when they're not parents. But when you meet these people that are in their late 30s, early 40s, and for men sometimes into their 50s, and they're not parents, they are slimy people. They are bitter, and like it doesn't age well. These aren't people who sacrificed having a family and kids so that they could create great art and push society forward. It's not like they didn't have kids because they were, creating a cure to cancer. They didn't have kids so that they could indulge in childish behavior for decade after decade, long past when their grandparents and great-grandparents had to grow up. Most of their great-grandparents had to grow up very early. And so these are people that haven't learned anything. Now they're bitter, they're unfulfilled, and they're hateful and resentful. And they honestly become unbearable. And then when you'll see like these Chelsea Handler types on social media, and they're trying to convince other people to follow the same path of, oh, what's the childlike or childless life? I get to get up at 11 a.m. and have my coffee and go to, this fancy bistro and then go to a movie. And it's like, I don't think that compares to seeing your grandchildren. She would have had them by now. Um, and having the joys of watching these little children experience their first, whatever it is, their first, there's first and everything, but you're trying to hold up these material things as a replacement to true fulfillment, or for true fulfillment, and it's so hollow, it's so obvious.
Until you die? Remain in the Soviet-style McDonald's as a consumptive unit until you expire and are composted to become the fertilizer for the other drones? What are we doing? The warmth of our civilization has been drained out because it wasn't clear how this contributed to productivity. Nobody is going to think to complain about this state of affairs as they wander around their bland modernist streets to collect their cheap food, assuming they didn't just have it delivered to their tiny neon pod by an immigrant anyway. It's no wonder that a quarter of young people aren't intending to have kids. Look at the world they're inhabiting. Why would they want to inflict that on someone else? And this is all the consequence of the maintenance of a system that our modern philosopher kings believe will bring us into utopia. It's the only tool they recognize as even having the capacity to improve the world, and so they are determined to use it to their utmost, despite the fact that the more top-down control that is exerted by them, the worse things are getting. And ultimately, this is the crux of the question of replacement migration. Much has been made of the UN's replacement migration study, which approaches the problem of population from the position of the system itself. As they say in the executive summary, they're interested in monitoring our society.
These bureaucrats and globalists have poisoned the system, broken the human spirit, attacked the family, attacked faith, attacked church, sterilized everything to where sterilized our economy to where there's just a handful of these giant mega corporations that own everything. And so our downtowns are dead. They've outsourced our manufacturing and these what used to be good blue collar jobs just to squeak out a little bit more profit by going overseas to cheap labor, and therefore left entire regions of this nation destitute and rotting. And now that they've done that, they've engineered the destruction of our nation over the last few decades. And now that they've done this and driven birth rates into the ground through poisoning our food and our water and putting and making birth control readily available so that we're well below replacement rates. Now that they've done all that, instead of at least at the very end here saying, holy shit, we fucked up everything, and now it's going to actually hurt us because we don't have enough people to actually man our aging society and make sure that the lights stay on and the roads stay built and that the little bistro down the corner store has the lights stay on and people are there to sell me my thing. Now that we're reaching a point of that, or we're coming into that moment, instead of acknowledging how bad they were at managing all this, let's assume that it wasn't malicious, that this was literally just in the moment selfishness driven behavior that got us to where we are now, where our societies are aging out. We're below replacement rate. Everything is sterile. Everything is ugly. Everything is dirty. There's no common community unity anymore. The churches have been pretty much run into the ground. and that the just your average character of an American is flawed deeply now, and all across the West that is the case. Instead of acknowledging that, nope, now it's let's flood the places with tens of millions of cheap, easy to control and buy off labor. People that they didn't build this place, they have no roots here. They have no investment. They don't care about our Constitution. They don't care about Western ideals. They cannot maintain Western society because they didn't build Western society. The only people that can maintain Western society are Westerners. White Anglo-Saxon Europeans, to be specific, are the only people that could truly maintain and continue Western society. It is our society. It's just like you couldn't take a bunch of Swedish people, move them into Japan while replacing the Japanese, and then expect Japanese culture to continue and Japanese society to continue without drastic changes, because Swedes aren't Japanese. They cannot maintain a Japanese culture, no matter how much they may want to. And so right now, they're to offset every bad choice and decision that they've made throughout the decades, they're replacing us. So they destroyed us, they've poisoned us, they're killing us off, they've rotted our civilizations, all in the pursuit of profit and control. And now at the very end, the last betrayal is they're just going to give away or sell off our lands and our nation and everything that we've built and our ancestors have fought and died for. I used to be okay with immigration. I didn't have any issue with immigration when there was like a set system and we were supposed to be like importing the best and brightest from around the world. So, your whole, the cliche doctors and engineers. And now we're just importing the world's trash. We're the dumping bin of the world. And that's what it is. And I could speak to this from my direct experience of where I live and how drastically things have changed in the last 4 years, to where English is almost a second language now where I'm at. And everything's dirtier, everything's more run down, everything's more desperate. The community, although not strong, because it is, where I live is like a medium-sized city, and so that had been destroyed decades previous, is non-existent now. And the people that were born here and who honestly belong here, because it is our place and what we have built. I'm sorry, I'm watching what this dude is doing out here. So we're being replaced. The long and short of it. Sorry about the distraction here. I'm fucking watching this idiot backing his truck up in the most retarded way that you could imagine backing a truck up.
As if they had a duty to maintain themselves for the system itself. Why are they doing this? Well, to maintain the required number of workers that would uphold the system's welfare commitments. That's it. Not because it will make human life better, not because it will make the world more pleasant to live in. The dystopia has been created because the system demanded it. In the conclusion, they explain why replacement migration is a good and necessary policy. Quote, "In the absence of migration, the size of the working age population declines faster than the overall population. As a result of this faster rate of decline, the amount of migration needed to prevent a decline in the working age population is larger than that for the..."
And what would a declining population mean? It would mean a smaller GDP. It would mean that corporations have a smaller workforce to pull from, and therefore probably have to pay more for the workers that they get. And so what is replacement migration about? It's about apparently corporate interest and just making sure that this perpetual, or this treadmill of this meat grinder of the mechanized modern society never slows down. Apparently that's what it's about.
The overall population.
Even if that means completely erasing ancient civilizations and diluting and destroying them to something that's completely unrecognizable. Like, small price to pay to make sure that McDonald's has a steady stream of low-income consumers to go eat, and that our little service industries of DoorDash and our menial factory jobs that pay barely anything, and Amazon have plenty of workers to pull from that they don't have to pay a livable wage to. That's all, as long as that continues, it doesn't matter that millennia old civilizations are completely destroyed in the blink of an eye.
They need workers, and as far as they're concerned, workers are basically all the same. So we can flood our countries with foreign peoples, regardless of the physical and psychic damage this does to us and our civilizations. Because otherwise, the system through which they intended to bring us to Utopia will fail. But when we leave the managerial world of abstractions and look at the world as it really is on the ground level, we find it a deteriorating, unwelcoming and alien place, devoid of beauty, of harmony, of happiness. In putting the system over the people themselves, we have created a nightmarish world in which atrocities have become normalized, misery is our daily habit, and terminating our own family lines becomes the only way out of what has otherwise become a prison without walls. This is the dystopia, in the here and now. We are living in it. If you would like to support me and help keep me out of the dystopia.
Alright, so that's pretty much the end of the video. It's hard not to get blackpilled. For things to change from where they are now, it's going to take drastic and hard measures. And I don't know if we have the stomach for it as a society, for what is going to be required. You can't repair this system. The system is corrupt to the core. It's unrepairable. It needs to be torn down and replaced. And I don't mean, with socialism or communism, obviously. I mean with a reinstatement of our original founding principles, which is, faith in God, the church, and the Constitution. And there has to be, obviously, a reversal, a remigration of every single person that has come here illegally. It just has to happen. I know that there are going to be people that think that this is harsh, and I don't give a fuck. You don't have a nation if you don't have borders. And no politician, there was never a vote held anywhere that I'm aware of that they turn to us and ask us to vote on opening our borders to the third world. That's never happened as far as I know. And we don't live in a democracy. If we live in a representative republic, which we do, I wasn't represented in the choices that were made to open our border and to flood our nation with people who will never assimilate, people who don't respect our principles, they don't respect our ideals, they don't respect our faith, they don't respect our communities, they have no roots in our Constitution, they have no roots in our nation, they have never fought, bled, or died for this place, they haven't paid into the system, they didn't build any of the system, their ancestors didn't build any of the system, and so they are just here. They're coming to pillage what other people have already built. If we allow that, We are destined to be, as he says, replaced. And as far as our corporate overlords and these rogue politicians are concerned, they're completely fine with it because they're raking in billions. They're set. They're selling us all out so that they can pilfer the coffers. So I guess that's my video. There's not any really humor in it. I found this video very interesting. And one of the things that made me make this is because he hit on the aesthetic soullessness that has become our modern Western civilization. I think that's a valid point. And with that, I'm going to jump off here. Thanks for watching the video. If you like what you saw, consider giving me a subscribe and a thumbs up, and comment down below if you agree with me or not. If you don't agree with me, that's fine, whatever. If you do agree with me, you are a great human being and I love you. So those are the parameters. If you disagree with me, you're trash. And if you agree with me on every single point I made and think I'm brilliant, then you are obviously a well-educated and thoughtful individual who has a heart of gold, and you deserve all that life has to give you, as long as what life has to give you is good and positive things. And so those are the parameters. I don't make the rules. I just inform you what they are. And so with that, I'm going to jump off this video.